Welcome to this session on liberal arts and employability. In case you just missed that, my name is Ellie Bothwell. I'm rankings editor and reporter at Times Higher Education, and I'm delighted to be chairing this panel debate at the Mena University Summit. In preparation for this panel, I asked a few friends and family who don't work in the higher education sector what they think a liberal arts education means. Everyone I asked thought a liberal arts education was centred on humanities subjects. As one person put it, he would not expect to learn about photosynthesis, but he might expect to read Pride and Prejudice. And those comments seem to chime with the typical view, in some circles, of what liberal arts education means. And they also chime, interestingly, with the definition I found in the Oxford English Dictionary, which defines liberal arts as art subjects such as literature and history as distinct from science and technology. But that's not the definition that is used by most liberal arts universities. Now, there is a caveat here, which is that I was speaking to people who are English and consulting an English dictionary, and liberal arts education is not necessarily a commonly used phrase here. But I think it speaks to one of the issues with liberal arts education, which is that it is not always an easily understood term. And I think this is a particularly important point to make when we're talking about employability, because if people have a narrow view of what liberal arts education is, then they potentially have a too narrow view of the employment benefits of such a model. Now, I don't want to devote much more time onto definitions, but given all I've said, I think it's important that we have an agreed definition for liberal arts education for the discussion. So as a panel, we are defining this as education providing general knowledge as opposed to technical knowledge and comprising the natural sciences, social sciences, arts and humanities. Liberal arts education teaches students how to think critically rather than a specific set of technical skills, although it can combine the two, and classes tend to be small and discussion-led. Now, during the debate, we'll be exploring the benefits and challenges of this education model in creating employable graduates, particularly for institutions in the MENA region that focus on education with a global perspective and whose graduates go on to join a global workforce. I'm delighted to be joined by three esteemed panelists from three liberal arts institutions in the region. Amine Bansaid, President of Al Akhawayn University in Morocco. Al Akhawayn is a public university. It opened in 1995 and it has a globally oriented English language curriculum. And Amine is a computer scientist. We also have Fatma Abdullah, Senior Vice Provost for Strategy and Planning at NYU Abu Dhabi in the UAE. NYU Abu Dhabi is 11 years old. It's a private university and it was the first comprehensive liberal arts university in the Middle East established by a major American research university. Fatma's research interests are in the area of gender and public policy. And Wasif Rizvi, President of Habib University in Pakistan. It is a private university. It was established in 2014 and it's the first liberal arts university in Pakistan. Wasif is a policy analyst by training. Thank you all so much for joining me today. So there aren't very many liberal arts universities in the MENA region, although the number is growing. And so it's difficult to gather data on these types of institutions in the region. But I looked at some of the data from the US and the National Association of Colleges and Employers in the US have found that employers often rank skills such as critical thinking and communication above technical aptitude as essential for career readiness. And data from the American Community Survey also show that liberal arts graduates enter a wide range of careers, although often liberal arts graduates end up then going on to do a master's or a more technical degree afterwards. So I wanted to kick off the discussion by hearing what you all think are the sort of main benefits of a liberal arts education in terms of employability. Amine, if I can come to you first, I mean, would you agree that it's the sort of critical thinking skills and the sort of global perspective that you think is a main benefit in terms of employability of a university like yours? And do you think that that benefit is well understood by the government and business sector in Morocco?
Thank you very much, Ellie. I'll start with the second one because it's easier. The second question about is it understood? We believe it's really not understood because it is, on the one hand, it is difficult to define, and on the other, because we are the only institution that is liberal arts in the country. However, what we know is that although they cannot put a definition on it or words on it, that there is an appreciation for this species by employers, both public and private. And I believe as time has gone by, there is more and more appreciation for things like some higher order skills, like ethics with openness. I mean, the world, the companies in the public sectors, some time ago, ethics would not be something that would be pinpointed explicitly. Now it is, and there is a big need for it. But ethics without dogma, with that open-mindedness, which really seems to be behind these citizens of the world and the global employee that you were talking about. So for AUI, for example, for Al Akhawayn, year on, year off, 30% of the alumni are always working outside of Morocco, and an additional 38% work for multinationals, 35 to 40% all the time. We get a lot of pleasant surprises sometimes with talking to employers, and they would mention what was an average student with us, but only to be talking about their creativity and innovation and things like that. So these are the things that really come up now with the last few years, where things have been changing constantly, and where there seems to be a bigger need for reskilling. There we also see some interest in higher order skills, because it's very difficult to predict how people's jobs will change or are changing because of the interactions with other jobs that are also changing. And so some of the upskilling is difficult to do in the corporate environment itself. It's easier to train for a new job than to train on the job. Someone to learn how to learn on the job changes over time. It's hard to train in the workplace and corporate environment someone to be agile. While they are doing their work, you're teaching them agility. I believe that what we do in liberal arts colleges, and what we hear from our students also, when we ask them, what do you think is making the most impact for you, or recent alumni, or older alumni, they keep going back to talk about analytical thinking and their ability to evaluate their own job as they're working. So having that ability to step back and identify the things that are changing. Creative use of resources is also something that we hear, and that is becoming more and more important. Or just the use and analysis of information, evaluating the additional information to seek to solve a specific problem, or where the info will be, or how valid it is, and how it should be organized, things of this sort. We also heard quite a bit from employers about self-motivation and self-direction, again, which seems to be coming from this opening of the minds. Lately, agility has come up quite a bit. I know there is some statistics out there from different studies, but it's always very nice to hear have firsthand feedback from employers. So these are some of the things that come up for us, for Al Akhawayn alumni, quite often.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And Fatma, if I can come and ask the same question to you about what you think the benefits are, whether there's been any issues in the UAE for your institution in terms of sort of helping others understand those benefits. And I also wonder, in your situation, whether being affiliated with NYU helped with this sort of initial buy-in for your institution.
Yeah. So I think for us, although employers may not always explicitly articulate that our graduates are sought after because of the liberal arts focus, it sort of the skills, as Amine has just said, the types of skills that they sort of value and appreciate are the ones that are part of the liberal arts curriculum. So NYU Abu Dhabi has sort of 26 majors in various fields, ranging from computer science to biology to art and art history and art practice. And all these majors are connected through this sort of core liberal arts curriculum, which exposes students, which uniquely at NYU Abu Dhabi are very diverse. They come from diverse educational, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds. And these sort of set of core competencies help them address these major global challenges generally, and then of course within their fields. And it fosters these modes of thinking and habits of the mind that are really central to a well-rounded intellectual sort of development and global citizenship. So I think it's the output really that's very, very valued. Now has NYU, of course, in its liberal arts sort of outlook helped us become known in the region? Absolutely. And we are sort of a school of NYU. We are part of NYU. But I think we've also sort of created this unique core curriculum within NYU Abu Dhabi that has also even advanced that even more.
Thank you. That's really helpful again. And Wasif, if I can ask the same question to you, and I'm also aware that you're sort of at the newest university on the panel, and so I wonder whether sort of earlier on in sort of convincing others of the benefits of a liberal arts education, or whether that's sort of already well understood.
Well, thank you. Really honored to be here and sharing this panel with Fatma and Amine. So in Pakistan, there was somewhat different circumstances. So we started talking about Habib University on the back of 10 years of mayhem of war on terror, which had killed about 70,000 Pakistanis. And most societal leaders, private citizens, as well as people in the public sector, were concerned about the lack of any positive impact coming out of the universities, or in very demonstrable way actually participating in some of the very toxic trends. There was a study that had come out which was titled provocatively, "Why Engineers Make Good Terrorists." And it was Diego Gambetta and Stefan Hartog study. It was a pretty well published, very well respected study. So that was our first step, to essentially create an argument that Pakistani higher education is wrong-headed. It has put all its eggs on this vocational, very narrow idea of what tertiary education is, and it has really failed societally and in terms of citizenship. And being a private university, that was our second advantage, because we looked at the institutional modeling of the private university, and the only successful ones exist in the US. Private universities are relatively new in the rest of the world. And that model is very simple, that you have societal ownership. There's a great deal of opportunity for a community to get engaged and involved. In our first iteration, we had a lot of business leaders who were part of that particular group who were excited about this idea. And then Pakistan itself, historically, it's a relatively new country. It really argued for a kind of civilizational perspective away from the Indian subcontinent that it is a part of. So essentially, there is not very well defined, but there was a very clear urge that, if we were to survive as a society and a culture, how can we not have our own independent view of literature, our own art, our own thoughts, our own social structures, our own view of reality from the point of view of our own civilization? And the only educational framework that allowed for this to come together as a core curriculum, what Fatima was referring to, was the liberal arts. So we had a strong sense of urgency and a bit of crisis, which helped us in turn for the acceptability. And then we essentially presented the range of skills which again, our leading employers became very conscious of that that's what they require. So this particular extreme example of the Gambetta study was people becoming extremists, but its watered down version was evident in the workplace, that we had MBAs or just MBAs or engineers and so on, who were just not suited for the 21st century workplace. And they were narrow in their approach. They did not work well with teams. They were not really effective in a diverse environment, multi-gendered environment, and etc. And all of these were sort of identified by business leaders in Pakistan. So that was, again, some compelling argument that an educational experience like a core liberal arts curriculum, which then also exposes them to very high-end skills of problem solving and complex thinking, being able to work with different points of views, and then have excellent technical skills as well. So for us, I think because of the unique historical moment that Pakistan was in, it became almost a natural calling for an institution like this. And we have had a very emphatic response from the employers. We have only graduated 3 batches, but there is a particular understanding that there is a different experience that these graduates are going through. Also, again, their connection to understanding the rigor of theories and text makes them very good potential graduate students. So that's another path that they are able to go to. And because they are focused on it's a small institution, there is much more personal attention that's available. That's why they sometimes make better graduate students than the ones who are coming out of large universities. So that has been our story so far.
Thank you. That's really helpful to hear that context, and I think really interesting the idea of sort of liberal arts education's, sort of being born out of necessity and a sort of urgency in the country. And all of you have obviously spoken about the sort of huge benefits of this model in terms of employability, but also the fact that maybe people don't always attribute those benefits specifically to the liberal arts. So maybe that's something that could be something that might progress in the future, I guess. I just wanted to remind the audience that there will be time for a Q&A session a bit later on. I can see a stream of questions already coming in, but if anyone else wants to ask a question, please do add those to the Q&A function on the screen during this discussion, and I'll pick those up a bit later on. But before I move to audience questions, I wanted to discuss a liberal arts education in the context of the pandemic. It's obviously a very challenging time at the moment. A lot of students and families have less money to spend on university as a result of the effects of COVID-19, but also a lot of people who have lost jobs or are conscious of the tough job market ahead and looking to retrain or sort of improve their chances of employability. Fatma, if I can come to you first, are you concerned that the situation we're in now might lead people to sort of gravitate more towards technical or vocational degrees where they might feel like the benefits are easier to understand? And how do you think sort of people who might be skeptical of the benefits of a liberal arts education can be sort of best persuaded of the advantages at the moment?
I think that the pandemic will actually draw students more to the liberal arts. And we've sort of at NYU, Abu Dhabi, and NYU overall have seen an uptick in the number of applicants. So we had a record number of applicants this year, significant growth. And so I think it is drawing people to that. And as automation increases and certain jobs become redundant, the core skills, that we provide, which are creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, have become even more important than they were before. I mean, I think it was mentioned by our Vice Chancellor, Mariette Westerman, this morning that no one stays in any single job anymore, or even any single industry. And so these sort of skills enable people to adapt and sort of to learn, to sort of reinvent themselves on a constant basis. So I think these are hallmarks of a liberal arts education. And I really think that the pandemic will in fact, increase interest in the liberal arts.
Wasif, would you sort of agree with that in terms of, I know you spoke about how there's actually been a real appreciation of liberal arts in your university in Pakistan because it's not something that was sort of offered before. Do you think that's continuing during the pandemic, or do you think there's a slight sort of veering towards people wanting to go with maybe what they're more familiar with a more sort of technical, vocational education?
I think the most immediate response is that who handled it the best in the past 1 year. And because we had this advantage of smallish student group, faculty that is very dedicated to students, adaptability, which is sort of natural to the whole community. So that has created the first tier of credibility that from the pure education perspective, a small liberal arts college focused on students is exponentially better equipped to manage the chaos versus a large university. So we have, like NYU, this is the most applications that we have received for admission. This is the response of the students, though, and their parents, I think, and the word of mouth and a little bit of advocacy that we have done. I think in terms of, again, adjusting well, having the empathy of this reality, essentially being socially engaged, I think the education experience remains of good quality. There are definite limitations, so we can't really downplay those, which COVID has put in place. But I think in terms of, let's say, what is required from after facing this pandemic, that who is equipped to adjust best, an institution needs to demonstrably show that. And then ensuring that there is a clear evidence that students have adjusted, as well as they are equipped, as well as sort of innovatively repositioned or pivoted to deal with this new reality. So I think this is the credibility of the institution to deliver the education has become more crucial for parents, and I think that would translate equally well with employers. We just have to see, because this is the first batch that we are going to graduate who have spent their entire senior year almost in a virtual environment.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And Amine, if I can ask the same question to you, how are sort of students and families and other stakeholders sort of perceiving your university and liberal arts sort of in the context of the pandemic?
Again, there are a number of things that Fatma and Wasif have said that really ring a bell with us. But I must tell, maybe I should start by telling you that we are concerned about our graduating students and the job market and the challenges on the job market. And we will be doing anything we can to help them. So we have that concern. Now, having said that, we have also had 4 times as many applications this year than we have had in the past year. And again, it's not that families and students are thinking liberal arts education. They really don't know what liberal arts education is, but we think it may have to do maybe with 3 things, let's say. One is the campus for a college experience, because a lot of families and students are lost between the safety and the college experience. And Mariette was saying it earlier today, talking about campus living as being part of the liberal arts experience. Our students have often referred to our campus as a safe haven, where they can do things, where they can try things, they can take initiative and not be punished, just trying things. And so we think families and students, think high school students, thinking that, well, here's a safe haven where I can go, I can have a college experience as normal as can be under the current conditions. we think may have something to do with it. Another thing is that a lot of our students and alumni refer to their experience as a transformative experience. We feel that right now, lots of families and young people are asking themselves such existential questions. I mean, they have lived a year that has been extremely difficult from a mental health perspective and from all the changes and need for agility and so on. So thinking that, here there may be some university or some model that will help me transform to deal with these things, may also have to do something with it. And the last thing I'll say may also have to do with the campus life. Our alumni have been very supportive and coming forward and to say, how can we help new graduates? And so it just seems that there is a bond that comes with that campus living, and maybe with the rest, the other ingredients of liberal arts education, that gives this mindset and spirit and the sense of belonging and giving back. I guess that seems to be very characteristic of liberal arts graduates.
I think it's really interesting that all of you sort of mention, application numbers sort of going up, but also sort of recognizing the people recognizing the benefits of a liberal arts model, sort of even during this time. I think that's really positive to hear. One other thing I wanted to explore before I go on to questions is I mentioned in my introduction the fact that many people aren't aware that STEM subjects can be part of a liberal arts education. But it also must be a challenge sometimes to combine subjects like engineering, where the core disciplinary knowledge is so intensive, with liberal arts subjects or with the liberal arts sort of education. Fatma, if I come back to you, how do you sort of reconcile that, combining intensive STEM subjects with a liberal arts education and find a way, or almost kind of find space to accommodate the two?
We sort of course, we have engineering programs, like you said, Ellie, and we were able to combine sort of the strong liberal arts curriculum with our engineering, science, arts and humanities, and social sciences, because we really help to, the liberal arts core really engages students in a certain way where they can build on the skills that they're learning. So let me give you an example of what we do with our engineering students. We have a course or experiential learning course called Engineers for Social Impact. And our students take this class and they go to a specific country in the world. They're immersed within that culture and that environment, and they learn from that community, live with the community, and then come back home to Abu Dhabi and begin to design sort of solutions to the problems that they see in these environments. And so this sort of integrates their engineering sort of requirements, skills, et cetera, with this outlook of problem solving, analytical thinking, communication, development of empathy, better understanding of the world and global challenges, et cetera. So we constantly try to sort of develop those linkages for our students, not only just in the classroom, but through experiential learning opportunities. That employers find very, very valuable, because students are not only sort of learning skills in the classroom, but actually applying them in the real world.
Thank you, that's helpful. And Amine, on sort of a related note, I mean, do you have to have sort of difficult conversations with academics in order to combine sort of specialist subjects with a broader liberal arts model, or do you find that you can sort of blend the two quite well?
For faculty, we're always trying to do optimize and do more than we can afford to squeeze within a curriculum. So as it turns out, I am a computer scientist, and I was was part of the founding team of the engineering school at Al Akhawayn University at the university's creation. And I remember that computer scientists were trying to get more computer science courses, and the math faculty trying to fit in more and the chemistry faculty saying that to students that chemistry is everything. And so that's what we are. And I think faculty will always continue to be like this. But I must say that 26 years after the creation of the university, the mindset has really evolved among the majority of engineering faculty, older ones and newer ones. And I believe it may have to do with just their observing that the transformative impact comes more from the liberal arts curriculum than from the technical skills and solving the equation or coding in a specific language. And so somehow I think AUI has come to a point where everybody culturally is, including the engineering faculty and the science faculty, are really convinced deep down that this is part of us, that yes, there needs to be STEM because of the big data and because of the digital transformation and because of the industry 4.0 and all of that. But that it is not enough. That's not what makes the specificity of AUI and of its model and of its graduates. So yes, it's necessary to give technical skills because the job market expects that. But everybody, I believe, at least the majority of faculty, realize that that is not enough, and that is not what AUI is about. Now, there are things that Fatma's comment reminds me of. So, engineering faculty, for example, for service learning, AUI introduced service learning in addition to community internship. Community internships were introduced in 2004, and 3 years ago, an additional component of service learning was introduced by allowing faculty to volunteer 15% of their grade for a service learning component. And most of the volunteers were from engineering, like thermodynamics faculty, reserving that much from their grade for students to explore how they can help the poor people in the area with the heating using their class material. And same thing for the renewable energies major and so on. So there is somehow I feel there is some cross-fertilization even between those liberal arts students and the engineering faculty that seems to come together nicely in the ecosystem.
Excellent, thank you. And Wasif, there's a question actually from the audience that I was going to ask you, although also feel free to answer that previous question if you wish. But the question from the audience is, how do you prepare your faculty to be good liberal arts teachers? It's quite a broad question, and I realise you could spend a long time answering it, but maybe you could sort of summarise the main ways.
Right. Just a quick comment on the conversation that was happening regarding STEM vis-a-vis liberal arts. So we actually celebrated the contribution of STEM in advancing various dimensions of liberal arts. Essentially, our main reference point was the design thinking, the D School, famous intervention by Stanford, which essentially was created within their School of Engineering, but allowed for multidisciplinary input into problem solving. So we have large design studios. It's an integral part of our pedagogy. So that was the first thing, that we did not intellectually alienate them. So that, look, you're essentially part of this movement of thinking, more complexly about various issues. Then the way we have designed our core curriculum, it has great provision for the STEM faculty to contribute, to lead some of those courses, and so on. So they are not looking at the liberal arts side of things from the fences and waiting for it to be over before they can descend with their chemistry and physics. So that's another thing. And lastly, the community of students. So Habib is one of the most generous private universities in the world. About 90% of our students are on a great deal of support. So that allows some very modest background students who are pursuing typically STEM, our School of Science and Engineering, but have great life experiences. So they essentially become much more drawn to the liberal arts side of things, being engineering students. So our music program is overly subscribed by our STEM students. Our poetry events usually are led by them. So essentially, there was like this three-pronged idea that we had, that we actually very sincerely engage and admit the relevance of STEM into liberal arts. And then we ensure that faculty continues to participate in the core curriculum, and of course have a community of students who are resonating with that. So our story has been generally pleasant. The next one, of course, as you've said very rightly, is a very complex challenge. Universities around the world had made a pretty fatal deal in favor of just doing one thing, and their entire ecosystem shifted towards that one thing, which was research and publications, all leading universities. And very rapidly, teaching became some sort of a menial work, which got sort of pushed around and so on. There's a joke at MIT that if you win Best Teaching Award, that means you will never get tenure, because that's not good enough. So institutions like us, who really not only value our students, but look at great innovative teaching, creation of wonderful courses as intellectually valid as one would celebrate a publication or something. This has been a continuous challenge. I think the main thing that needs to be done at a macro level, that the credentialing, intellectual credentialing of individuals and institutions need to reacquire that balance between teaching and research. And we are creating multiple programs for that. Because if you looked at promotion, tenure, accreditation of institution, everything is heavily favored towards creating one type of an enterprise. So that's one. The other is, our faculty spends many years, 7-8 years in graduate schools, really internalizing this particular notion that somehow if they become or focus too much on teaching, that's not good for their careers. So that's another something that we have to really create an ecosystem of our own to reassure them that no, actually engaging with students, coming up with this sort of brilliant community of learning is a very intellectually valid trajectory. So, and then comes the training part. So there we have created a network of partners in some key institutions like Harvey Mudd College, which is a great liberal arts engineering school outside of Los Angeles. NYU Abu Dhabi has been engaged with us since the very beginning. Some colleges, primarily in the US, where they have handled that challenge and have created possibilities for faculty to become better and better at it. But being in Pakistan, at least, I'm not too sure about Gulf and North Africa. Being in Pakistan, we don't have that luxury of choice to pre-select an ideal faculty member. In the US, you have that advantage that there are always a critical mass coming out of Harvards and Princetons who are not interested in getting in the rat race of publish or perish. And they are temperamentally better suited to join a university like a Habib or Al Akhawayn or NYU. But we don't have that diversity of choice. So we do admit faculty, and then there is a process through which we hope that they become more and more convinced that this is a very intellectually legitimate enterprise, and they actually have a good career path and trajectory as a result.
I think that's really interesting when you're highlighting the sort of tension between research and teaching, and also I wonder whether the pandemic, given that teaching has moved online, and certainly from the UK perspective, there seems to be a sort of renewed appreciation for how difficult it is to teach effectively, and how, you know, successful some academics have been at teaching online. I think maybe hopefully that will go some way to sort of maybe redress that balance in the future. There's another question from the audience here. Well, there are a couple actually about cost, coming from quite a US lens. So I'd be interested to see whether you feel that the situation is the same in the MENA region or in your own countries. One of them is about, you know, do you believe that the cost of liberal arts education justifies such a degree? You know, they say in some schools in the US, the tuition is over $100,000 a year. And someone else talking about liberal arts education in Asian countries such as India are way more expensive than other traditional education, so much so that it is perceived as a luxury or an elite's choice. Do you think liberal arts should be subsidized to incentivize students or families and allow more students to join liberal arts education? Fatma, maybe I can ask you that one first, and then the other panelists can come in if they wish afterwards.
So we at NYU Abu Dhabi really are need blind. We admit students, and then of course we assess need based on a student's income. And so we strongly believe in access and equity for all students, regardless of where they come from. And so that has definitely been positive for us. We're probably closer to Habib in many ways, perhaps not at the same percentage, but we're close in that sense. And so we really sort of, access is really important. And its cost can of course be a challenge for students in terms of higher education across the globe, but that's how we sort of contribute in our small way in trying to sort of enable a diverse group of students to access an excellent education.
And Amine or Wasif, I don't know if either of you wanted to add anything on that.
If I can, Amine.
Yeah.
Right. So for us, actually, this is one of the three big problems that we are addressing. Pakistan is the fifth largest country in the world, so it's 225 million people. And access to higher education of any kind is very limiting, and especially of any decent kind is almost impossible. So there was a big access issue that has gotten created in Pakistan, that getting to or getting enrolled into good quality universities is only limited to a very tiny fraction of students who are coming out of international high school system like A-level and O-level. And the local examination, which is about 95% of all high school students, they have no chance to get into a university, apparently, which looks like Habib or some of the other places. And the reason for that is simple, because private universities especially did not, and if they have any kind of quality and liberal arts bend, they really hadn't conceived themselves as a community-owned institution. So their only revenue is from the students. So the problem that we are trying to solve is to essentially influence philanthropy in general in Pakistan. And present them the example that although society is generally very generous, but their priority, if they are giving to any kind of education, it is just primary basic education. So we are growing a community of supporters, and we have been very successful in that, to ensure that this becomes a properly societally owned institution and is celebrated as a world-class center, as similar to a Yale or a Stanford, where community comes together and continues to support it. I don't think that we can't cut corners with our faculty. We have to ensure that they are properly supported. We can't reduce the facilities or support on campus. So it is going to cost. So the cost is, in many ways, is justified. But the question is that who pays for it? Are we recovering it from students, or are we mobilizing a larger social response to ensure that students are not facing the brunt of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think, it comes back to employability, because I think, if people understand the sort of employability benefits of a liberal arts education, then I imagine it's something that philanthropists will be much more willing to sort of help fund, and also obviously on the employability, in the context of employability, if we're wanting to give students a global perspective and train them for a global workforce, and we also want them to be in diverse classrooms. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting sort of topic to discuss in this context of employability. Amine, you feel free to comment on that if you had anything else to add, but there was also another audience question that I thought that you'd be well placed to answer, which was about how are employers adapting to liberal arts trained employees or liberal arts trained sort of graduates. And someone here is wondering whether companies are sort of creating roles that truly value and accommodate liberal arts education in response to maybe your institution or others in the region. Have you found that employers have changed what they're looking for?
So I'll come back and comment about the other question later. But so let me speak quickly to this. I think the most ready employers, because you see there are some employers that are kind of struggling themselves to get for their business and to get what they need done and so on, and there are others who are successful enough, good enough in consciously looking at the best things to do for their return on investments and so on, that they will take advantage. They will take more advantage of what each of their employees is offering, and so we have seen both. We have seen some that really just try to identify these different strengths of our graduates to give them more freedom that will offer more value to the company, and they've both our alumni and their companies have benefited significantly from this, and we have seen others in some cases that really just try to bear with the critical thinking, for example, where the culture of the company is more, please just do what you're told to do and deliver what you need to deliver. And sometimes some of these liberal arts education graduates are always looking for what initiative can I take? How can I do more? How can I do better? And so we have seen both. Now, through the years, I believe that employers in Morocco have adapted and learned to think, well, for this I need to get an AUI graduate. And so more and more of our graduates and our alumni have been finding the jobs and being solicited for jobs where they thrive. So yes, some, maybe a large number of employers have adapted. I must say also that I believe our students and graduates have also adapted with time, because they need to be mindful of the job market and of the specificity of the employer, and really with behavioral intelligence, which is something that employers have really been asking about. Now, about your earlier question, maybe a couple of thoughts. Yeah, AUI actually has 40% of our students who are supported by the university. But we really believe that we need to be mindful about the return on investment from tuition, and that yes, it is. It's a hard line to walk. So we have part of that responsibility. today we really believe that the challenges that we're facing, that our students are facing, and that the job market is facing in the 21st century call for liberal arts education and for liberal arts skills. So we believe we have today more of an opportunity to educate on this. That agility that is needed, and that emotional intelligence that is needed, and that open-mindedness and that resilience, and so on and so forth. So we have been working on this for about a year now, and we have been successful in getting more subsidy because we're in Morocco. We are unique. There is no other liberal arts college, and I must tell you that we're doing it. Before doing it for the subsidy, we're doing it just because there is a critical mass of faculty and managers at AUI that really believe in this, believe that, yes, the country should take more advantage of this. So we're kind of taking on that role of trying to take our responsibility and communicate and explain and all of that. Now, the other thing we're doing, and we're probably going to be doing in the next few years, is that I think liberal arts colleges, and AUI specifically, would do well by trying to see what optimizations are possible. How do we make this more affordable? How do we speak to families' concern about return on investment? And maybe technology will play some role there. Maybe partnerships will play some role there. But I think it would serve everybody for us together, each institution and the liberal arts institutions together, think of explicitly, deliberately of, can we make this more affordable as a system?
Thank you. That's really interesting. Fatma, I also wondered whether you wanted to comment on the question about employers. I'm wondering whether the sort of presence of NYU Abu Dhabi has sort of shifted the way that some sort of companies the roles that some companies have, and whether they're sort of creating almost positions that are catered for liberal arts graduates. Have you been finding that?
Well, not directly. I mean, I don't think I've heard of any sort of employers that have directly sort of come to us and said, we're creating this position for an NYU Abu Dhabi graduate. But I think what is happening is the UAE overall is moving towards a knowledge-based economy and is moving towards greater diversity and inclusion, and we are we're very, very diverse as it is as a nation. And so our graduates are highly sought after. We have similar to what Wasif said, we have a huge percentage of our students that go on to graduate education at elite institutions across the world, but many others work in government, not-for-profit. They become entrepreneurs and set up their own companies. And so I think even though it's not explicitly created for our graduates, and we have, because we're not as old as Al Akhawayn, we're graduating the 8th batch of graduates this year. We haven't had people say we're creating this for NYU Abu Dhabi, but our graduates are very sought after in the UAE and the region, because we have students from all over the world, and they go home and they do very well, or they stay within the UAE and do very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And Wasif, if I can come back to you, one area, I mean, we have obviously touched on the idea of liberal arts education sort of benefit being sort of preparing students across their life and their career, rather than just sort of for their first job. But I wanted to ask specifically about lifelong learning, which seems to be a sort of greater emphasis in a lot of countries, a lot of sort of governments maybe placing more emphasis on the importance of lifelong learning. Do you think that's an area where sort of liberal arts education can really sort of prove its value?
Right. Just a quick comment on the conversation before. Mm-hmm. We are encountering that there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the business leaders want, who are very, very open to, maybe they have a different kind of exposure. Their children themselves have gone in institutions like NYU, Abu Dhabi, and so on. So they are much more open to the idea of looking at liberal arts graduates favorably for employment. It's just the entire apparatus of hiring of HR managers and the way they interview and the way they select, which is not necessarily compatible. I think that's what we are working on very patiently. And I'm not saying that we have any challenge. Our graduates, almost all of them are taken up even before they are out of their final semester. But we do believe that there is that issue of having the right insight in the industry, that how to engage the employment process of a graduate of an Al Akhawayn or NYU, Abu Dhabi or Habib. Yes, so the lifelong learning is essentially this love of learning, right? So we have one of the core courses is actually about love. That's love and desire. And we do focus on the phil in philosophy, which is love or wisdom. So I think that's the fundamental basis of it. That how do we have these 17, 18 years old and essentially sort of create a community that engages with the rigor of learning as an end, not as a mean to something. I think essentially that's the attitudinal change which makes a lifelong learner. We have a way of looking at our courses. We call it CPAC: content, pedagogy, assessment, and community. So content, pedagogy, and assessment are the formal part of evaluating a course. But the community is that what kind of interest it generated, sparked among students to, on their own, not for any credit, not for any formal academic work, how have they reacted to the experience of going through that course? So there are these principled ways in which we are ensuring that this lifelong learning is just not a lip service or not just a tool to convince the employers, but a fundamental principle of being at a place like Habib University.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to say that we're now out of time, but thank you so much to Amine, Fatma, and Wasif for joining me today for a really interesting and insightful discussion. I think we could also tell from the comments from the audience that it was a discussion that people were really engaged with and really interested to hear more from all of you. So thank you so much for all your insightful comments, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll now hand back over to Hannah.
Thank you, Ellie.